Hello and welcome back to the Pilgrims of Plunder podcast. I am with Doug yet again, as we will always be, since it's plural and not singular. And today is a lighter episode, hopefully, as light as we are capable of being on pop culture, namely around that of movies, but also to include perhaps music and television and video games. And just sort of a general conversation on the topic of good movies, bad movies, good and bad media. Should we even have these things? Which is probably a totally different conversation.
300's overrated.
But whatever it may be, gasp.
I was trying to bait you.
How dare you? And so, but all of that, but really the prompting for this, why I wanted to sort of have the conversation, is that I'm all for acknowledging that there are two reasons why people make anything for amusement or entertainment. And it is either because it is telling about who we are now or where we want to be, where we think we should be. And
I know that about making money.
Oh, well, no, there's absolutely about, I think ultimately, yes, it becomes nothing more than making money. You find what works and you capitalize on it.
No. I go the high road. I'm all for the high road.
No, you're not wrong. But as a creator, right, as somebody who wants to make a thing, you make a thing because, you think that that's where we are. Is it a commentary on society? What is that phrase? Does art reflect
art for art's sake?
Art reflect society? No, I don't remember what it is.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's some justification for, like, why would you make something so awful and be like, oh, it's a reflection on the current, I don't know, whatever.
I want to do a whole one on art.
We're going to do a whole one on art. This is not the art one. We're going to talk about a lower form of art, which is known as movies. But the real point for the prompt of this for myself, just wanted to kind of bring this up. When my wife and children were off on vacation for a weekend, it was a miserable and very quiet weekend for me here. And I sat around on the couch and watched a whole lot of movies. And that's all that I did for like 4 days. It was just, let's binge watch another stupid movie. But what was interesting is the stupid movies that I was binge watching were all from like the mid 90s. And I was shocked in a good way, and also somewhat sad about the characters, how they were written. And I want to start off with the movie Speed. So for anyone who hasn't seen that movie, again, I would be remiss if I didn't say, from a moral standpoint, there's nothing morally good about the movie, just as far as, language and content and so on and so forth. That all being said, whatever, I've watched tons of movies in my life. Speed, however, there were certain things that jumped out at me that you don't see anymore, which is why they're so apparent. One, the main character, played by Keanu Reeves, is a man. The main character is actually a man. He is fighting for and protecting innocence, those who are weak. He is rational, calm, collected. He thinks in high tense, high speed situations, life and death. His character is a competent, capable man who's not aggressive, abusive, destructive, but who uses his God-given masculinity for the defense and protection of those who are in need. He doesn't cry. He doesn't whine. There is a scene where he's very angry because his friend dies in the movie, and he has a 30-second outburst and then recovers and carries on as a man ought to. So that was the first thing that jumped out at me. The second thing is he's a cop, and the police in this movie are actually the good guys. They're not corrupt. They're not really the villains. They're not anti-heroes. They are law-abiding, law-promoting police officers who are out there risking their lives to bring down the bad guys. Mm-hmm. The bad guy, played by Dennis Hopper, who did a phenomenal job as a villain, is a villain. He straight up murders people. And he's not some misunderstood, abused, whatever. No, he's a bad guy. He hates whatever stupid thing. He feels entitled, and in his entitlement, he is just gonna watch the world burn. He's a bad guy who's murdering innocent people. And Sandra Bullock's character, I don't remember her name, she is a woman who actually behaves and thinks and functions as a woman, and it's not this helpless weakness. She's still competent. She still does what she needs to do given the situation. So she's not the Victorian era, put her on a pedestal, you're not allowed to say, do, speak, think, whatever. But she's not Captain Marvel, who I'd like to point out everybody hates, and for good reason. So this movie, no one would even think to make, where the cops are the good guys. Your protagonist isn't an anti-hero, but he's actually one of the cops. The bad guy's a bad guy. And the women are women, where the men are men and the women are women. And the good guys win, and all is well. That movie just blew me away, because you don't see movies like that anymore. Go ahead.
So this is not really about movies then. It's about the shift of the culture.
Well, it's about movies. I wanted to start with that.
Okay, because
it's a cultural take on movies.
Mind, but because related to movies. I wanted
to start with that, and then we can talk about
because that recently happened to me. I was toying with going to see The Flash because I like DC Comics.
Right.
And Michael Keaton, spoiler, shows up from the 1989 Batman. And so I had my teenage daughter said, "Do you want to watch Batman together?" And it's just so she could have a reference if we wanted to see The Flash. So there was a scene, I forgot all about this in Batman 1989, is Bruce Wayne, Michael Keaton is interested in Vicky Vale, I forgot the actresses, some blonde, and they're talking, and he gets frustrated with her, and she goes, "Look, I like you. Just shut up and listen, okay?" And I was like, "Oh
my."
Yeah, because I've been so trained, like, you don't do that.
Right.
And I had a laugh. In 1989, I didn't notice that. I saw that in the movie theaters when it came out.
Sure.
Actually, I remember seeing it with what eventually would be my best man at my wedding, because he was heading off to the West Coast. That's the last thing we did together in Connecticut. So I distinctly remember that movie, and it didn't faze me the least.
Yep.
And I had a laugh, and I made a joke. I said, yes, the 80s when men were men and women liked it.
Right.
And it's amazing how we have feminism has so taken over movies. I'll give you another example. I remember watching the Japanese version of The Ring.
Okay.
This horror movie, but it's not R-rated, it's not graphic, it's more creepy.
Right.
And there's this scene.
I think that was the original. I think the original one was the Japanese.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Japanese.
I think there was an American remake.
The Japanese one, there's the heroine, and there's the protagonist, the male, female, and there's romantic interest, and your classic Hollywood stuff. And there's a point in the movie where the evil demon girl's coming at them or whatever, and they're scared. And she starts, and she's a smart, heroic character, but she starts getting a little bit hysterical. And the guy slaps her and says, "Focus, we need to take care of this business."
Yep.
And I remember I had this huge knee-jerk reaction, like, "Oh, this guy's the most evil person ever."
Right.
And I'm like, and I realized, I'm like, wait a minute. In Japanese culture, when this movie was made, that was the appropriate thing to do. The time was of the essence. Hysteria would not help. He had to get her focused. And she actually calmed down and listened to him, and they were able to save themselves, at least briefly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I've been so trained to have this knee-jerk reaction. And I had to laugh, because it's not only, it used to be that men found that attractive, women found that attractive.
Right.
Andrew Klavan, the guy from the Daily Wire, the art critic, older gentleman, very interesting to listen to. He commented there's a very famous Cagney, what's his first name? James Cagney, movie, a black and white movie where he plays a gangster, and he's with his either girlfriend or his wife. It's a very famous scene. He gets frustrated with her, takes a grapefruit, smashes it in the woman's face.
Mhm.
And I'm not advocating that, by the way.
Right, right.
Yeah, that was inappropriate.
We're not
but he was a
saying
tough-
that we
but-
should.
but he was a tough
Right, right.
gangster. But Clavin points out that made him a sex symbol among women
Right.
because that was a strong, powerful male. And I'm like, what planet?
Right.
I mean, again, it wasn't just guys who
Right.
found that, like, yeah, that's a man. And again, I'm not advocating you push around a woman that way. That would be
Right.
ungodly.
Right.
But how the world has changed, how we've emasculated men.
Yes.
Can I give you one more example, or do you
Go.
want to jump?
No. Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
One of my all-time favorite cultural movies it's actually my favorite John Wayne movie, is The Quiet Man, and it's interesting to see what scenes they edited out of that movie and what now we would edit out.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen the movie The Quiet Man?
No, I'm not that cultured.
Awesome. I'm not a huge John Wayne fan, though I do enjoy him a little bit.
Right.
And I'm losing power here.
That's okay.
He's an American boxer, professional boxer, really skilled, and he kills the guy in a ring by accident.
Okay.
And just normal fighting, but the guy dies.
Yep.
And it affects him. He's like, I can't box anymore. He's shell shocked.
Right.
He just can't do it. But he's rich enough because he's very skilled boxer. So he decides to go back to his roots and goes back to Ireland. And there he meets Maureen O'Hara, this fiery redhead, and it's a love story, and it's fun.
Mhm.
But there's two scenes they edit out. There's one scene at the very beginning with the lovable but kind of shady Seamus character is shown going to the village priest, the Catholic priest, and he collects some money, clearly saying that the priest had a bet on something, did some gambling, and
Right.
had to pay up.
Right.
That was edited out of the movie for public consumption because it was inappropriate to show clergy in a negative light.
Yep.
That was cut. There's another scene where they have a fight and they're married, Wayne and O'Hare, and he throws his wife on the bed. I'm out of here. He throws her bed, and she lands in the bed, and the bed breaks. The next day, the Seamus guy goes in, sees the broken bed, and says, "Oh, newlyweds." That was banned.
Yeah.
That was too sexual. That was too pornographic. And now you have a pastor saying it on the internet, and it's perfectly okay.
Right.
And I'm like, what world was that?
No kidding.
But there's another scene, and they left this in the movie, and this would drive people crazy. They're married, and she starts rebelling, and he gives her some slack, and then finally he has it, and he goes, "Look, you're my wife, you're coming home." And she tries to punch him. Now he's a boxer, of course he doesn't hit her,
Right.
because he just simply dodges out of the way. I mean, he's going to kill her if he actually hits her, and he knows she's his wife in that situation. But he grabs her by the collar and literally hauls her home.
Yep.
And the whole town comes up and cheers him on. And this little lady shows up and says, "Here's a switch to beat the old nice lady with." And it's meant as a joke.
Right.
And I'm like, and you're supposed to laugh at that. And like, that's what a man does.
Right.
That would get you crucified.
Yep.
This day and age. And so you're absolutely right. There's been this huge shift that men cannot be men in movies. Women should be men and men should be women or something. And it's madness.
Yep.
So
no, it is. It's awful. Shifting to a lighter cinematic review.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's supposed to be a lighter.
No. That's fine. That's fine. No, I'm all for it. Shifting to a lighter one. The other movie that I watched, one of the other movies was, I watched all the Jurassic Park movies. So, the four of them, because I think there are 6 total. I got
there's one.
There were only 4. So I watched the first one. What a masterpiece of just everything. And again, and I'm gonna feel really bad. That was Spielberg and Williams. So that's Steven Spielberg was the director and writer, and John Williams did the music.
My hero.
And so, I mean, right there, anything John Williams touches is gold.
But that movie, understood, was considered feminist for that time period.
Oh yeah, I don't care. Whatever.
But here's the question, because I'm a generation older than you.
Like
has it already started to creep in?
Oh, of course. Yes, of course. Even again, the contrast between then and now is apparent, but that doesn't mean that they were actually good or conservative movies. Yeah. All social commentary aside on Jurassic Park was just a good movie. There were some technical issues that I had with it, and there were some obvious, stupid things for the sake of cinema. But that was an amazingly directed. And one of the things that I actually think that stuck out to me was and this is a credit also to the director, the acting was phenomenal. Like most of that movie was sold based off of how the actors responded and looked. Because for as revolutionary as the technology was, which I think was Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic they used, as revolutionary as the technology was for computer graphics at that time, the selling point was that the actors still had to be really good actors. And this is something that when you go further back, like into, we're talking Hitchcock era, you didn't have effects. And you had to sell every scene on the face, on the actor, the actress. They actually had to portray an emotion and an experience that the audience would then feel. And you notice this in Jurassic Park, and it's in that wonderful scene when they first arrive there and they're in the Jeep and Grant is looking up, and you don't get to see the dinosaurs yet, but you see Grant's reaction, and then you see her reaction. I just watched the movie. I don't remember any of the characters' names. Their response is so amazing. It sets you up for that. So then when you see it and that almost like Dutch angle sort of a thing, when you look up and you have these massive dinosaurs, you are now already experiencing the amazement that they so beautifully portrayed. And we've lost that, I think, just in cinema altogether. Actors are boring because we have special effects now.
CGI is a problem. I definitely think wokeism is a problem.
Woke is a problem, of course, yes, as well.
Because the left is just, life is meaningless. It's just about the self-expression of your selfishness. And so there's nothing heroic. There's nothing tragic. It's just victimhood, and it's horrible, and they're destroying so many franchises. But let me ask, this is one of my favorite questions to ask people for icebreakers. List me your favorite movies, all-time favorite movies.
How many of them do you want?
I have top 5, and then
top 5. All right,
10.
We'll do.
But you give me whatever your top tier.
I can give a few. I can give a few, and this will be this only for today, just for today. My top movies are. I'll just give you kind of a handful, and they're going to be for different reasons from totally different genres. And I'm going to have to start with, and I know that I talked about it once already just because of one scene, but overall, the Pixar film Inside Out was for me, and still is, just one of the most amazing movies. I love it. I've rewatched that movie a bajillion times. It's beautiful. Again, I think a huge part of that is being a father.
Verna saw it and hated it.
It's whatever.
I
loved it. I loved it. The jokes are great. The characters are great. The story is wonderful. I am all for that movie. I think it's a beautiful movie. So that's definitely one of those. Along a much more serious note, I would also, going into social commentary, and I know you hate the genre, and I forgive you for that, but the first Blade Runner movie.
It's a good movie. It's well put together movie.
Is a fantastic movie. Harrison Ford did a great job in that. There was also the guy who played Odama, Edward James Olmos, which was kind of funny. I forgot that he was even in that movie until rewatching it. That movie I absolutely love because I love the cyberpunk genre, and that was one of the defining visual representations of that genre. Ridley Scott did that. I loved Ridley Scott's older work. I think his newer stuff is pathetic, although Napoleon looks promising. But
wait, Napoleon Bonaparte?
Napoleon. There's a new movie, Napoleon, with Joaquin
I don't watch movies. I'm old.
Joaquin Phoenix plays Napoleon. It's directed by Ridley Scott. It looks like it has potential. It's along the same lines, that same visuals of Gladiator, which also was a Ridley Scott film. But anyway, noticing a trend. So Blade Runner I thought was fantastic. But it also, just sort of back to our original topic, there's a somewhat rapey scene in that movie where Harrison Ford character, not Harrison Ford, he did, you know, again, it's Deckard, the detective, forces ultimately Rachel, the android, into, you know, into sexual acts. But it also, I mean, like, he's very forceful about it, and she's initially hesitant and resistant, but then goes along with it willingly and enjoyingly, and so on and so forth. But that's caught a lot of flack among modern movie critics because it's somewhat rapey. I don't know where I fall on it. I think even maybe I'm a feminist in this, maybe I'm a Christian in this, and I'm like, yeah, that is a little bit rapey. But anyway, I think one of the justifications is she wasn't human, so she's an android, and he knew that, and she knew that. You know, she's not actually. But that's for our AI discussion. The humanity of computers, they don't have any. So, Inside Out, loved Blade Runner. I think I loved Alien. The Alien and Aliens were some of the great movies.
Only two of those
that's
movies.
Ridley Scott and James Cameron, phenomenally done. Those were great.
I have my list.
I think, and one more that either people will not get and hate, or maybe like, but I absolutely loved, is Lost in Translation. I don't know. There's something about that awkward not belonging. The like, you are totally out of place and alone in your personal life and geographically and culturally, because again, the premise of the movie, you have Americans, they're over in Japan, Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson, and it's just, you know, their experience, their personal experiences, and then as it's made manifest, if you will, in their surroundings of being in one of the least Western cultures ever. I think it's just, it's such a well done movie. But anyway, so anyway, go ahead.
My top 5, and
Sure.
most of them are basically of my favorite genre, epic.
Okay.
I love it when the focus is on the bigger story and less on the individual.
Yep.
But for me, my favorite movie of all time is A Bridge Too Far.
Never saw it.
World War II movie about Operation Market Garden from 1977, I believe. Okay. Probably the greatest all-star cast. Most people, unless you're a war movie fan, don't like it because the star of the movie is the operation. It's the battle.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And spoiler alert, the Allies don't win.
Right.
And it's one of those movies has that rare balance of it has great martial music. There's wonderful times where it's like, yay, military. And it's also considered an anti-war movie.
Yeah.
Which is a wonderful, it does both. And I think it's my all-time favorite movie by far. Also on the list, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings, extended version, because you have to have the Galadriel.
The only version.
Yep. Mary Poppins, because that's just an amazing movie.
The original one.
Yeah,
because they remade it.
Well, no, they did too. Yeah, no, that was okay. But
I'm sorry to inform you.
No, I saw that too. I saw that.
I know. Yes, that was good.
The Avengers, the first MCU one. That's a near perfect action movie. I love the Avengers.
Okay.
And Ben-Hur with Charlton Heston. I have not seen the new one. Those are my top 5 favorite movies. I mean, I mean, there's other ones: Midway, Patton, Blues Brothers. But
Blues Brothers.
No, but I
what a good movie that was.
That had one of these days, if I get the courage, I would love to do. I might do it as an April 1st issue. The top theologically correct movies that are shockingly theologically correct.
Right.
So I have 3.
Right.
I had the Blues Brothers. Strangely theologically correct.
It is.
Especially with the ending.
Yep.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Absolutely.
One of the few movies that actually gets God correctly.
Yep.
And then the weird one, and it's unfortunately R-rated.
I love it.
The Witch.
The Witch.
Which took me years for me to con you to watch that movie.
Because I don't care about horror movies, but I didn't know it wasn't a horror movie.
Yeah, well, I hate horror movies. I don't like. I hate gore.
Yeah, I'm not.
Pay me to watch Saw. The Saw.
No,
movie.
it don't. You can't unsee it.
I haven't. I would not. I refuse.
I saw Saw, and I wish I didn't.
Yeah, no, But The Witch,
Horrible.
it's as if a 17th century Puritan wrote a horror movie.
Yep.
And I know pagans love it. I don't know why, because the witches are evil, but I took it as a morality tale.
It was.
And I'm like, because the witches are evil,
Yep.
and this family slowly gets tempted into evil.
Mhm.
And I mean, and they were like so much better Christians than I am on some level.
Right.
And yet they slowly get into the darkness.
Yep.
And those are, because most movies about God get it wrong. Like, all like with
Bruce
Morgan
Almighty.
Freeman. Yeah, I refuse to watch that. That's just wrong. And some of the pure flick
Such
movies, like the
heresy.
one they have Hercules and he meets God. Even the clips I saw, that was wrong. Ben-Hur is one of the few movies that gets actually Jesus Christ right.
Okay.
And have you seen the old Ben-Hur?
I think I watched parts of it because my dad was watching it.
Because because it's one of the few movies that gets Christ right.
Yeah.
Because they don't have our Lord speak, which I thought was wise.
Yep.
You only see him from afar, and there's these two beautiful scenes. There's this one scene where one of Ben-Hur's female friends has heard about this new rabbi preacher, and they go to the Sermon on the Mount, and you see all these people walking up this mound to hear Christ speak, and Christ is just standing there, and you see Ben-Hur, who at the time wants nothing of it and is walking away.
Right.
And it's such a powerful scene because it's the Sermon on the Mount. He's like, "Nah, I'm out of here. I don't want to hear about this garbage." And of course, later gets converted. But my all-time favorite scene, there's a scene where Ben-Hur is a slave, and he's been ordered to have no water. So he's nearly dying of thirst, and he collapses, and he cries out to God for mercy. And literally God shows up.
Right.
And then you see Christ bend down and give him water. And the centurion turns around and says, "Who's this? I told him to give him no water." And Christ just stands up, and the centurion does this amazing job of acting. And I heard he was actually just a stunt double. He wasn't even an actor.
Yeah.
But he does this wonderful range of emotions on his face. He's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "What? I'm scared." because he's confronting God face to face.
Right.
And it's a beautiful scene. You can probably find it on YouTube. Ben-Hur, the 50 version, the centurion scene. And you're right, that conveyance of just the face.
Yep.
In the range of emotions. But yeah, when we talk, we're all of a lot on this one, but this is what we do for your episodes.
Oh, yeah. No, that's the point. Go all over the place. That's the point.
And so movies can express these things, but
yeah,
can I change subjects, or do you want?
I wanted one more thing on the movie topic before we venture off.
No, it's gotta be movie related.
Oh, okay. Well, no, it was for whatever reason it prompted me. I was thinking Saving Private Ryan, because we were talking. Oh, I was talking about movies that you can watch like once, and that's about it. I watched Saving Private Ryan once, and it was.
I took a Vietnam combat vet to see that movie in the theater.
Yeah. It was an amazing movie. And
I had to say, dude, are you okay? Do we have to leave? Yeah, because he was like,
yeah. I recommend everybody see that movie one time. But again, it's the knife scene toward the end of the movie. That's that one is just it's so hard for me to watch. But again, there's that the brutality of war. And as I think we Christians ought always be anti-war, right? Yep. War is a product of sin. War wouldn't exist without the fall. So there should be no, and I'll proceed very cautiously. There should be no pro-war Christians. Now, of course, there is a time and a place where war is appropriate, and so we shouldn't be. So the idea that you have just warfare, which is a totally different episode that we should definitely have at one point. I'm not against just warfare, but war is brutal. And it's one of those things like you don't think a lot of people fully understand. People suffer and die in war. So watching Saving Private Ryan, where they do such a good job of, it's like when you watch like the good unedited, the World War II footage. And there's death everywhere. There are dead people everywhere. it's one of those very sobering things. It's like those were people. That
It's
sucks.
interesting though, and it's a good movie. It has the
I
ending.
like it.
I think it's a good movie. Some of the endings, it's an okay movie. The first 20 minutes is just so visceral.
I think the
And
journey is what makes it great. I don't care about the ending.
My favorite scene though is with General Marshall. I find that the most poignant, where the secretaries they're writing these letters, this mass production of sending out these letters. Oh, by the way, your son died.
Right.
And she realizes there's 3 of them or like 4 of them or something that's
Yep.
died. And it goes up to the chain of command. And then they have the debate. And it's a real debate.
Yep.
Should you do this? Should you risk a whole squad to get this one guy?
Right.
And they have the great military debate. The colonel, who actually I heard was really, I think it was a real colonel in real life, says, we shouldn't do this. This is not worth it. And the guy with the 4 stars makes the final decision because
Right.
military.
Right.
But Marshall, this is such a great scene because Marshall's such an interesting historical figure. And he starts reading this letter from Lincoln.
Yeah.
And then he puts it down halfway through and he keeps on going.
Yep.
And he says, look, if that boy's there, we're going to find him and we're going to bring him back.
Right.
And, the general of the army gives you an order. It's like, now,
Sure.
well, debate over. This is
Yep.
the mission.
Yep.
But it's such a poignant scene. And then they don't say anything. You have Ryan's mother and you see the car pull up and you see
Yep.
this officer get out and then the chaplain gets out.
Yep.
And she collapses because she knows what's coming.
Yep.
Because clergy are the minister are the angels of death.
Yep.
And very powerful.
Yeah.
So
but yeah, so good.
But let's ask. I want to ask the moral question because obviously you and I partake in pop culture.
Yep.
That's a pretty new thing for conservative Protestants. My good Baptist fundamentalist devout Christian parents, parent-in-laws, if that's a term.
Sure. Yep. Go with that.
They wouldn't even go near a movie.
Yeah, and they're
They would
better
not
for
watch a G. They would not go to the movie theater because that would be a bad witness to Christ. Because hey, he's a Christian going to a movie theater. What movie could he be seeing?
Right.
Now, to be fair, they would watch movies at home, including James
Right.
Bond movies, albeit edited for TV.
Right.
But where's that line? Where's that? Saving Private Ryan is an R-rated movie.
Yes, it is.
Albeit for violence, and
Yep.
obviously for violence.
Right. It's war. War is a bit violent.
But where do it just a few decades ago, we would not be having this conversation publicly.
Right.
You would be brought under church discipline for omitting to watch some of those movies, and I'd be defrauded.
You'd be fired.
It's not like I love watching R-rated movies, and as I've gotten older, I definitely stay away from those kind of things. But but have we been desensitized? Even off the movies, like playing World of Warcraft.
Right.
That's a very slightly PG rated game.
Yeah.
But there's still night elves running around in chainmail bikinis.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
No.
And to what extent have we been tamed by the culture? I remember that. I can never remember the exact quote, but I heard a great quote about it was from a Christian about how we've changed the definition of pornography. It used to be pornography was an objective thing that showed certain things.
Mhm.
Now it's intention.
Right.
So you can make what was the fantasy series on HBO? Fire, Ice, Throne, Fire.
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Yep.
Didn't see it. Heard
Me
it's
neither.
basically pornography.
Yep. From what I gathered.
But our culture calls it not pornography.
Right.
Because it wasn't made as pornography.
Right.
So you can have explicit sex scenes.
Right.
And violence. And so I don't know if you want to go this direction.
So
but,
actually, and that's a fantastic example to use. So you have J.R.R. Martin's. No, is that whatever? No, whatever. So you have Martin's books, which are medieval fantasy.
Yep.
That are overtly mature, to use that term, mature and rated.
What a horrible word to use.
I know, right? Mature, because we associate these things. Because I guess it's the contrast; they're not for children.
Yeah. But yeah.
Then you have Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Now, to say, I don't care about who did what adaptation better. are the shows and movies reflected, blah, 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 blah. But even just take a step back and go with the books. Now the Tolkien's works, Lord of the Rings, is it plural?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Ring?
No, it'd be rings because there's more than
rings.
one.
There's more. There's multiple. There's one ring that rules all the multiple rings. All right. So I guess he's Lord of the Rings, whatever. So Tolkien's world versus Martin's world, or the presentation thereof, you could easily debate and say Tolkien's is better. Tolkien's is not graphic, right? It's not graphic with violence. It's not graphic with sex.
And it's Christian myth.
And it's Christian myth, right? Now,
but
can you still now? Are we, however, are we making excuses for it because the movies were PG-13? I think because of violence.
Yeah.
But again,
there's no language, there's no sexuality.
Right. There's no language. There's nothing with that.
Some orcs get their heads lopped off.
Orcs get killed, and green blood isn't real blood, so I think that's okay. It works for Germany. So the question then becomes, but however, how far do you push? I have no problem saying it would be clearly inappropriate to watch or read Martin's fantasy.
Is watching worse than reading?
And that's a different thing.
Yeah, sorry.
And then, no. But that's
I think
question.
So. But I'm distracted.
Maybe. No. Yeah. It depends. Well, but anyway, but can you make arguments against even watching Tolkien's movies?
And the good Fundy Baptists back in the day in the 40s were very much against Tolkien and Lewis. And
right.
And I love Tolkien and Lewis.
We couldn't even read or watch. Yeah. Well, they didn't. I don't know if they
were they right movies. Though.
We weren't allowed in my house to have anything to do with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe because the depiction of anthropomorphic animals, and that is very ungodly. Was my parents' justification. Of course, the irony is that Lewis wrote it and it has very strong Christian overtones.
Overtly, yeah.
But the presentation of it was, to my parents, very pagan. And they're not wrong.
You see that?
If you approach that as pagan myth. Christians don't have talking animals except for one donkey.
And it's
that was
very
God.
hard because in one sense, I used to be, if you asked me this question a few decades ago, I'd be like, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. We can't read Beowulf. We can't read Cicero. We just read the Bible. And we can't read the things of Western civilization. We can't read King Arthur, can we?
I was going to say, you can't read Shakespeare.
No, yeah, right.
I mean, you want to talk about immorality. Oh my.
I must say, and obviously I still read Tolkien. I still read Lewis. I'm a fan. Yep. I do wonder if they were right. Because, man, it is a slippery slope. And what I now watch, which is considered as G or PG rated stuff, and I'm old enough to remember in the 70s when I was a little kid, even back in it was, of course, starting in the 60s and 70s when the sexual revolution hit, you just didn't show that.
Right.
Yeah. The I Love Lucy show from the 1950s, they had to show separate beds in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
They're a married couple,
right,
with children, and you go in the bedroom, and they're not even in the bed. You had two separate beds,
right?
Because you don't show that type of, you don't imply anything too sexual. Because let's be blunt, of the Christian ethic, and we've been liberated. And I'm not sure.
I mean, even look at commercials. Look at commercials for soap. Women's commercials for soap and skincare products. They're commercials of women taking showers.
Oh, you couldn't you couldn't show bikinis.
Right.
On television, let alone a woman in any underwear. That was just revolting.
Yep.
And now, I mean, I'll do a wedding, and women will come into the church basically half dressed, and there's no sense I'm going to the church, I'm going there's going to be a pastor there, this is how I normally dress, but I should cover up. No thought of that.
Right.
I mean, we've lost all sense of modesty and decency. And how far do you go back? And are we,
Yeah.
are we part of the problem? We're getting deep and philosophical here. We're
Right.
not talking about movies. Um, you know,
Well, that's fine. That's fine.
for me, enjoying Lord of the Rings, is that part of the problem?
Right.
And where's that line
Yeah.
that eh, that interesting question. I
It
mean,
is, and we've had that talk before, even just on the general concept of fiction.
yeah,
Does fiction have a place within the, if you will, Christian world? Because fiction is predominantly, if you will, non-Christian. There is Christian fiction, I suppose, but ignoring, I'm not talking about like modern whatever.
Pilgrim's Progress.
But like Pilgrim's Progress is Christian fiction. Lewis, there was Christian fiction, and again, is that okay? And and not to go the full other way of just like, well, the only response therefore is monasticism. All right, let's all go be monks because that's the only proper way to live life. Um, though there are dangers even with creativity, the Sistine Chapel, that's all sorts of violations of idolatry, and that's a beautiful painting in a church. So you can try to Christianize almost anything that doesn't make it actually Christian. But I know that the specifics of the theater in Rome for Augustine, there were obviously very, very much sexual and sexualized. His critique,
and overtly pagan. They're
right. Oh, well, because it was a part of religious practice, fertility, all these various things. And so he was very heavily critical on the sexuality that was portrayed in theater, but most of even the non-religious practices, because a lot of religious celebrations took place in Roman theaters, but even the entertainment, right? The Greek or Roman plays, which are purely for entertainment value, were very raunchy, or very disrespectful and very rude. There was also that contrast that he brought up between what was permitted by Greek culture versus Roman culture when it came to your civil leaders.
Yep.
For Romans, I'm going to mess it up. For one of them,
the Greeks were more
it was fair game to mock.
Romans were more conservative.
It was fair game to mock your civil leaders. And the other one, it was not. It was forbidden. You don't speak against, the leaders appointed by the gods, essentially.
The praetor, yeah.
Right. And so, however, Augustine's criticism, no one had a problem with satire depicting the gods, though. You can mock the gods in your satire, but not the political leadership. And so like all of these things. And so his, again, Augustine's point was the theater, all in all, is useless and awful and should just be avoided like the plague. And I kind of laugh and I wonder, I'm like, maybe he was onto something. What has theater done for us in the grand scheme of things?
Well, no, Andrew Klavan, who I think, who is a Christian artist, he likes art. I think he takes it too far. And again, I want to have a whole separate section on art, because I think art can absolutely become an idol.
Right.
But to go with your question, is it okay for Christians to do fiction? I mean, we've had great works of Christian fiction,
right?
The Commedia.
If you're an author for children's books, you shouldn't fall under church discipline.
Yeah.
It's like
Erasmus's Praise of Folly is wicked good. My all-time favorite book, the book I've probably read the most outside of Scripture and the creeds, is the Demon Book by Lewis.
It was
that Screwtape
good.
Letters. Wow.
Screwtape Letters. Oh yeah, that's a
phenomenal. Getting old.
Yep.
I love the Screwtape Letters. That is, I think that's the most brilliant work of fiction. And I don't think that's a sin. I don't. Right. I mean, we are called to be creative. Scripture obviously allows poetry. Now, obviously, warns against writing about too many books. There's a danger there too, as Solomon noted.
Yep.
but I
Nice,
so
nice
I think
backdrop for that
yeah,
for
yeah,
that statement.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I definitely think that, that the arts are allowed. I think we have to define what art is, and that's for a whole nother
that's a
episode.
different thing. Yep,
I've given that a lot of thought.
yep.
And I think there is a place for fiction, but there's probably more of a danger to it than we realize.
Hmm.
And but back to my other question, how much should we consume of this?
Right.
Because there's been, like I said, a huge, huge change. I mean, I'm from the congregational tradition, and they banned all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And with modern cinema, let alone with the internet, how much you should consume, what are the standards?
Right.
That those are interesting questions.
They are,
Um,
and they're very deep questions. And honestly, and I do want to, I do want to before
Yeah.
shifting yet again to absolute mindless
yeah, I'm sorry,
fluff discussion.
I
No,
hijacked
no,
it
no,
into
no. And it is that point to ponder, and we shouldn't just be dismissive of it or downplay it or make excuses. But it is, I think, one of those things to think about is how we are cavalier. You brought up one point which I really appreciated. Cavalier about things
Yeah.
that perhaps we should be far more uh silent about. And again, like, how openly do we just are we okay with it? And a lot of the things is, it's not because we look at it and identify it as this is an absolute horrible thing, but I don't care. A lot of the stuff, right or wrong, probably more wrong, doesn't occur to us as being something that, oh, we really shouldn't have any part in,
And we've been taught by
whatever.
that. Well,
So
there was I saw a poll recently. I think it was taken a few years ago. They polled millennials or modern people, whatever that term is now.
Yep.
What's a greater sin? Watching pornography or not recycling? And
right,
not surprisingly, the younger generation is like, "Oh, it's not recycling. That's
it's not recycling. That hurts the planet."
So, but for those who are watching, and I know this is just us talking.
Yep.
I think you do have to keep cognizant of the old standards.
Yeah.
So, and our culture doesn't understand this. Sexuality is not a public thing. So
Agreed.
That you
Agreed.
got to be careful about. Now,
Yep.
granted, modesty as a concept is universal. It does change
Sure.
according to culture.
Yep.
But the universal notion of at least shooting for some sort of modesty is appropriate.
Right.
And what is that old computer line, garbage in, garbage out?
Mhm.
I think you have to be careful with that. I do think language, because I notice if you listen to someone who swears a lot, and that can
Yep.
creep into your vocabulary, and we're supposed to control our words.
Right.
The one I think we lose the most of is blasphemy.
Yes.
As you like pointing out, the first tablet we can't break that, but the second tablet we can't break that, but the first tablet of the law,
That's
sure,
fine.
why not?
Say whatever you, yeah.
So I do think we have to be careful. I know, if it's R-rated, I want to know why it's R-rated.
Right.
And if there's a sex scene in it, it's like, nope. And
Right.
it's unfortunate because there are some movies. I confess this. I watched this back in my younger days. Like, I love Shakespeare in Love.
Right.
And unfortunately, there's two stupid sex scenes in it.
Mhm.
I've been trying to find a version that doesn't have it, but it's a great movie. It beat up Private Ryan for best movie, and I think it.
Nah.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. No, I'm in
Yeah.
a minority there. But it's such a shame because it's such a great introduction to Shakespeare to children.
Right.
Because it's Shakespeare light.
Right.
So you get used to the language, you get introduced to the arts, but there's two problems with it. There's two sex scenes, those have to go. And it kind of winks at adultery, but only half. Because the main character does have an affair with the main female character, but she's promised to someone else. But at the end of the movie, she has to marry whom she's betrothed with. And Queen Elizabeth, played by Judi Dench, which she does a great job, says, there's even things I cannot put asunder.
Right.
And I'm like, yay, reference to the Almighty.
No,
but
most things don't need sex scenes, quite honestly.
Yeah,
I've watched a number of movies that I'm like, why?
And they're going
was
away,
that in there?
unfortunately,
I know
for
why was it
feminism,
there.
and that's another conversation to have. That we're actually returning back to a little higher standard when it comes to nudity and sex scenes,
Yep.
which is a good thing to have a higher standard, but because of feminism, and that's a bad thing. But
Right.
that's another conversation.
Right. No,
So
it is.
it is a strange thing because I do, I enjoy watching movies. I enjoy
Yep.
watching TV shows.
Good
Though I
movies
find
are
myself,
good.
though I find myself watching more and more of the old stuff
Yeah.
and the
Yep.
old stuff on YouTube,
Yep.
and even stuff before my time in the 50s and whatnot.
YouTube.
So,
So do you have a list for television shows? What TV
favorite
shows do
TV
you like?
shows?
Yeah. TV is an antiquated term, just any sort of show.
I'm old. Um,
I mean, I
I
don't have
yeah,
TV
you know
anymore.
that. Oh, I know. Oh, I know what it is.
All right.
My all-time favorite TV shows. It's Bruce Timm and Paul Dini's animated Batman, Superman, and Justice League.
Okay.
By far, my favorite TV shows of all time. It used to be Good Eats with Alton Brown, but I've kind of waned on him. But those are by far my favorite TV shows, without a doubt.
Okay.
They're the pinnacle of what I think comic books should be. That right balance. There's story, there's interesting characters, but they had a censor for kids,
Right.
which modern comic book movies and books don't understand. So it had
Right.
that right balance of depth, but it's still very GPG.
Yep. Shows. I actually love the show Troll Hunters.
I don't know what it is.
It's
What
on.
is it?
It's fine. It's on Netflix. It is a show. It is an adaptation of the Guillermo del Toro book. Well, he and another he co-authored the book Troll Hunters, which is I think a young adult level sort of
Is
book.
it animated?
It's animated. It's on Netflix. I bought it because I don't have Netflix anymore, and I really, really wanted to rewatch that show. The first Troll Hunters, because there are three of them. They're like, well, it's sort of a trilogy by story. There's Troll Hunters, there's Wizards, and there is Three Below. And Three Below and Wizards are Troll Hunters is probably one of like the greatest shows. I absolutely love it. It is an incredible amount of
What
fun.
makes it so? Because I've
The
noticed
character,
something.
everything.
I've noticed something between you and I,
Uh-huh.
and it's not it's not. I'm more spiritual.
You are.
I'm older. You are much more tolerant of stuff than I
Okay.
am, but it's an age thing.
Okay.
Because I'm much more tolerant of stuff that offended my parents,
Right.
and you're more tolerant than stuff than I am. But it's an age thing.
I don't know what's offensive in Troll Hunters.
I've not seen it.
Okay,
I don't know.
It's great. The protagonist is wonderful. I love the
Kelsey
dialogue.
Grammer's in it. Oh,
Kelsey Grammer does such well because Kelsey Grammer does a great job for everything. Kelsey Grammer, his character is amazing, and his delivery, of course, is amazing. There's also Luke Skywalker. Mark Hamill does one of the characters. He's actually Kelsey Grammer's character's brother. Dictatious is done by Mark Hamill.
It's based on Johnny Quest.
There's a
That's
strong
a great
vibe.
cartoon.
Yep.
Such a great cartoon.
It is a really, really good show. I love it. I've watched it numerous times. A much less good show. In fact, I have incredible criticism and praise for it, is Mr. Robot. And Mr. Robot,
I don't know what that is.
I watched because it's cybersecurity. It's hacking.
Okay.
And it is accurately described as one of the most accurate shows within the hacking space. So when it comes to the accurate depiction of cybersecurity and of hacking and of nation state threat actors, it does so very, very well. The problem, so that's the praise for it. It's phenomenal in that. The critique of it, which is also somewhat of a positive for it, is they take that same level of authenticity into everything. Okay. And it's a very dark show. The characters are very dark. The situations are very dark. It is a very dark show. By the end of your, you're getting into your third and fourth seasons, it is miserable what's going on. And I appreciate that they don't glorify the misery of it. It's one of those like, look, this is what this is what the life of these people, they're criminals, right? Criminals don't have good lives. It's miserable. And the ultimate conclusion of the whole show, I mean, like when you look back at it, it was awful. It was tragic. Horrible things happened to everyone, both horrible and not. I watched that one a lot, again, just because it is incredibly dialogue driven and it is very, very well written. And the actors are great. It has Christian Slater and Rami Malek. I'm butchering his name. He went on to do.
I'm so old. I have no idea what you guys are.
He played Freddie Mercury in the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, which I did not see, but I think he probably did a fantastic job in that.
Okay.
But I mean, like, the acting is great. Sam Esmail is the director. He did a phenomenal job directing that show. I mean, like, all in all, like, all the pieces are phenomenal. It's a miserable show that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to anybody, but I've watched it. I do think that it was incredibly intriguing, but ultimately a very depressing show. So those are my two. Like, I've rewatched both of those numerous times.
Like I said, I find myself, I don't even have TV anymore, but if I do watch something, it's YouTube. Like, and I found, related to your background, I didn't know this existed. Like, in the early 50s, they made a show called The Silent Service, I think it's called, and it's all about it's all about historic submarine operations.
Yep.
And they have some rear admiral retired introduces each episode, and they depict an event, usually World War II, sometimes Korea, about a sub. And it's hilarious. Like, you have Leonard Nimoy and whatnot, because in their earlier lives in these shows.
Sure.
And it's just, there's something just wonderful 50s about it.
Yep.
So one of my pet peeves, though, I've noticed something in some more modern shows, they sneak in the agenda much later.
The mess.
Like, you'll watch a show, and like for the first few episodes, I remember watching the American version of House of Cards, and it's like, okay, there's a few bad language, but it's generally clean, and then like horrific sex scene in like the fifth episode. Just, and I'm like, okay, I gotta stop watching this.
Yep.
One of the worst offenders of it, I was watching with my daughter the new version of Voltron. Yeah. And the old version of Voltron was pretty bad back in the 70s, but I watched it as a kid. And the new one, the art was phenomenal. The stories were so much better. Totally invested. And for like the first 5 seasons, it was epic. I think it was around the 6th season, they introduced the main character, I think, of the Black Lion, like the leader, the Captain America, the manly man who everyone looks up to. And they made him gay.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was so offended. There was no hint of this for the first 5 seasons, but we had to make it woke, and it was so offensive. It's one of the few times I actually like started yelling at the television. Actually, there's a fun question. Have you ever? There's like 2 or 3 times in my life, and I'm not one prone to violence or yelling, that I was offended by a television show. Have you ever had that? I have too.
Oh boy!
Should I go with mine?
I've gotten angry again to the same thing that you made, that same point. You become invested in a character or in a particular story arc, and then they do something with it
really stupid.
That's really stupid.
Oh,
I know that's yes, I do. I'm angry about it, and I stopped watching the show altogether.
Rage.
I forgot about it. So again, one that I wouldn't recommend for morality's sake, the show The Blacklist. I wanted and this is the funniest thing.
What's The Blacklist?
The Blacklist. So it's a crime crime drama sort of a thing.
Gotcha.
The premise is that you have this underlord crime boss internationally who has a list of all these other evil crime guys, and he makes a deal with the FBI for protection in exchange for handing them names on the list. And then they go out and they capture all the bad guys and so on and so forth. Of course, the storyline changes and evolves over time. And there are numerous plot holes that you kind of have to just sort of ignore. But it's funny because the reason why I got sucked into that show is at the time, I was really just wanting a show that had a main character. I wanted a protagonist who wasn't incompetent and a weenie and weak. And I don't remember the actor's name, and I feel so bad because he does such a great job. His character,
James Spader.
Yes, James Spader. His character is the most calm, collected mastermind, and he goes right in, and he's so just perfect in all that he does. And it was immediately the character I'm like, I just want to watch somebody who's good at what they do. I wanted a character who was good at what they did. And it was amazing. And the really good episodes of it are those ones where you think bad things are going to happen, and then they twist it. It's like he had it. It was all a part of his master plan. And I'm like, awesome. They started to imply later on in that series that his character was actually transgendered. And that he
really a woman, or that he was a guy who wanted to be a woman?
Used to be a woman who became a man. And that was the implication. I stopped right there at the end of that season where they started hinting this is because the whole premise was that the big mystery was whether or not he was the father of the girl there. Oh, I don't remember her name. The FBI agent. And of course they do that whole stupid girls can be boys, look, we're strong, capable FBI agents too. And I'm like, that's not how that works. But the big secret that they were trying to imply, the big mystery, was maybe he's her father. And that's why there's this weird relationship that he tries getting into her life. But then they started twisting it.
Might be her mother?
And it might actually be, because at one point earlier on, they hinted to reconstruction surgery. And I'm like, okay, I'm cool with reconstruction surgery. But then they started to twist that and make it was, that level of reconstructive surgery. And it was actually not, her father changing his appearance to avoid detection, but it was her mother. And I'm like, nope, we're done. I'm like, we're checking out now.
All right. Wow.
Very angry about that.
My two are I remember when Babylon 5 came out. I've never been so angry at a movie, TV show. I hated, because Babylon 5,
it was
the
good.
premise was it's not Star Trek.
And
it's
not Deep Space Nine.
I love it because the superior race was deeply religious. And had customs and traditions and wasn't your typical, American approach. And they were very religious and the most scientifically advanced. The hero, I love the episode where, was it Vosh, the guy in the guy in the containment suit who could come out,
the cool energy
was actually an angel. And he popped out to save the guy, the main hero, and everyone saw him as the angel by their own cultural definitions, but he was an angel, except for the one person who was flirting with evil who couldn't see anything. And the main villain race were demons.
Yes, they were the weird shadow people.
This is brilliant. This is so not Star Trek. That you have these deeply religious concepts in science fiction, and that your main enemy are demons. So talk about a race you can really hate. But then they did the stupid episode where the humans decided that, and they had that horrible phrase, we've evolved beyond good and evil. And they told the angels and the demons just to go away because now they're superior to their silly concepts of right and wrong. Which, of course, if you've evolved beyond good and evil, that means you're just evil.
Right.
And it was such a pull the rug out from underneath your feet. I was so frustrated with that. I didn't watch another episode after it. Because it's just like, you've spent years and episodes developing this great plot, and you're like, no, we're Star Trek.
We're done.
The other one was Star Trek. It was Oh, it was the first one they redid, like the early Enterprise under Pike. And they go to this world that is dying. There's two races. There's one dominant race and a kind of more submissive race there. But the dominant race has this plague that's killing them. And the doctor of the Enterprise, because they're more advanced, easily comes up with a cure that's going to save billions of people.
Right.
But because they don't have warp travel,
Yeah.
and we have the stupid Prime Directive, which is stupid,
Which is classist and racist.
Yeah, a little of it's okay, but as a universal law, it's a stupid law.
Yep.
Because they don't have warp drive.
Yep.
They refuse to give them the cure. And they actually cite the moral reason for that is evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you for proving that evolution is for mass murder.
Right.
And I'm like, the doctor who refused to give him the cure and the captain should have been tried and executed for mass murder.
Right.
But it was portrayed as this is a good thing. This is a moral thing. And I'm like, you guys are just evil. I'm not surprised you believe in evolution, but
right.
I was so offended by that episode. Because I mean, the old Star Trek, they actually had Christianity in one episode.
Yes, they did.
Bread and circuses.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the two times I was actually just like, I was like, this is horrible. And you're right, because they pull the rug out from underneath you.
Yeah.
By the way, what's the time clock? How long have you been going?
Hour and 5.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So this has been a totally randomly episode.
It has.
Yeah. I do want to do an art episode. I might do that for
Yep.
our next one, but I want to do a little bit more reading on the subject because the redefinition of art does interest me.
Yep.
Because should we even do art?
Right.
And what is art? I think that's actually would probably help answer some of the general questions, but we were talking
maybe we
about
should all
movies.
just go be monks and stop consuming all forms of media.
Yeah.
You know, because it's all evil. Even the G-rated stuff teaches rebellion and you know and idolatry and a whole bunch of actual and overt sins, and those are marketed for little children.
I know. And that's a conversation worth having. And I think it
Burn
helps
it
a
all.
little maybe to define what art is. But
Anyway.
I'll close my thoughts on just one quick question.
Sure, yeah.
Name me your number one favorite movie.
Oh, we did top movies.
I want only one.
Only one.
Yep. Number one. Yes, we can't. No.
I don't have one. I don't even know what criteria I would use to describe. Wait, by what criteria?
By that which you enjoy the most.
Oh.
The movie that brings you the most enjoyment.
Oh, well. I mean, all right. I love Inside Out. That one's an enjoyable
here's
movie.
the deal. I was hoping you were going to say
I'll go with enjoyable. That was an enjoyable.
I have not
movie.
seen Inside Out. I think
That's
Verna
fine.
watched it and hated it.
That's
I will watch Inside Out if you watch A
good
Bridge
taste.
Too Far.
I'll do it without a equivalent exchange scenario. I'm like, I don't know.
Because like I said, I am fascinated that you are more tolerant of non-Christian things. And again, it's not because I'm more pious, it's because I'm older.
Right.
Which is, I think, a fascinating thing.
Right.
So, but
I'll go with I guess I'm okay with that. If I change my answer,
I'll watch Inside Out, and if I
change my answer, I'll bring it up in another in another thing. But that's probably it. All right. But I have no problem watching whatever your movie is. But anyway,
Bridge Too Far.
So Bridge Too Far, sure. So anyway, thank you everyone for suffering with us again through totally schizophrenic topics on this episode.
Blame Craig
and me. But no, we appreciate it, and we hope that you will join us yet again. So thank you, Doug, and have a wonderful day.